Okay, I think we'll get going. Just quite conscious of time. So hi to those that have joined us so far. I'm just going to check this is going. Yeah, here we go. Welcome to this Business Growth Hub webinar on taking the challenge out of innovation. This is part of a series of weekly webinars that go on by multiple consultants that have been put on by the Growth Hub, which is just to cover all different types of support and help for businesses out there looking to grow, looking to get around challenges, very prevalent in the time that we're in. Everybody's looking for support right now. And innovation is one of those key areas where really we're all trying to think differently, and we're all trying to come up with new ways to push our businesses forward, navigate challenging times, and future-proof and keep moving forward. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. Certainly how you can bring innovation into your own organization, some tips and tricks and some methodologies to look at, a little bit of background of why innovation is important. And hopefully we'll be able to guide you through some of that. My name's Wayne Willis. I'm one of the innovation consultants at a company called Identic Group, and I'm joined today by Jamie Del Grosso, who's my partner at Identic Group. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, guys.
And just for a little bit of background for you, Identic Group is an innovation consultancy. We work with brands and companies and organizations all around the world, helping them to implement innovation into their own business, helping them to future-proof and bring in a culture of innovation and new thinking into the business so that they can keep evolving and keep moving forward. And so we're going to try and talk about some of that with you today, and hopefully you can take away some insights from that. What I would say is we do welcome questions and comments, and if you've got anything you want to ask or anything you want to add, please type it in the Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try and field those throughout this webinar, or try and address them at the end for you. I'm very aware that there'll be people from all different types of businesses and backgrounds, and everyone will have their own unique situation, so we'll try and address as much of that as we can, but hopefully this general overview will give you some good insight. So Identic Group, so as I say, we're an innovation consultancy, and really what we do with innovation is we try to underpin this with our key principles. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of issue with moving around here. So here we go. Sorry, so what is innovation? That's the starting point. What is innovation? There's a lot of buzzword around that. You'll see every man and their dog has a title of innovation on LinkedIn, or transformation, or agile, or whatever it might be. And it can sound quite buzzwordy, but it is vitally important to be able to keep evolving and moving forward, especially in the times where we're in, where everything's moving so very quickly. We define this from our side as translating an idea into a product that has value for which a consumer will pay. Now, when we say products, that doesn't just mean a physical thing that you're selling. That might be a service or some form of outreach that your company does. Maybe you're in events or something like that. And in terms of value as well, it doesn't always mean monetary value. It could be value in brand affinity, or gaining new followers, or been an influencer, or whatever it might be. You know, so value covers a lot of different areas. But ultimately, that's what we're saying with innovation: coming up with new ideas and pushing them forward that offers something to your consumer, which makes them feel, yes, I like that, I want that, I need that, and I want to be part of it. We underpin our innovation strategy really by three core principles, which we call the 3Ds, very apt, which come under be disruptive, think differently, and embrace digital. And we'll go through each of these and try and explain a little bit about what each one means and what it means to your business. So be disruptive, again, another one of them nice fancy buzzwords that you'll hear all the time, how to be disruptive. This phrase was first coined by this chap here, Clayton Christensen, who was a professor at the Harvard Business School, and he wrote a few interesting business books around this whole idea of disruptive innovation. And he was the one that coined the phrase, and the way he defined it was when a company enters a marketplace at its roots with very simple basic applications, and then relentlessly moves up through the marketplace rapidly and displaces the incumbent businesses that are in there, or the incumbent legacy companies that are holding that position. And you'll see just to the right of your screen there some very, I mean, there's thousands of examples of it, but there's some very famous examples you'll see from the logos there. So Uber, everyone will know Uber, who brought out a whole new way to look at taxi travel essentially, and getting a cab, and they were addressing the issue of getting a taxi, you know, looking up a provider, finding the number, having the right cash, getting one on time when you needed it, etc., etc. And Uber brought out a whole new model to displace this, which is all over the world now, and most people are using this and essentially booking through an app with the card details and everything already booked in, and they can track the car and they can physically see where it is and all that kind of stuff. And of course, as you'll see, it comes up on LinkedIn and places like this all the time. You know, Uber don't actually own any cars or taxis. You know, they're simply a service, and they essentially leverage the people out there who have got vehicles to join into that service and provide that service for them. Very famous one, Netflix, of course. Those of you old enough to remember will remember the good old Blockbuster video days and going out and hiring a movie for the family and all that kind of stuff. And then, you know, streaming came along, and Netflix completely disrupted this marketplace. You know, they provided entertainment on demand in your house using your internet with a basic subscription fee, so you could access anything at any time. And of course, Blockbuster Video, as an example, who had 9,000 stores around the world, were very, very quickly disrupted and now don't exist. I actually think there's still one store in mid-America somewhere, you know, clinging on, but as a rule, we look at home entertainment very differently. Airbnb did exactly the same for hotels, so you've got all the massive hotel chains around there with the Hiltons and all that kind of stuff. And again, like Uber, they utilized what was out there. People had houses, they had spare rooms, they was all over the world, and they provided a service where you could access a space to go to wherever you wanted to go, get a cheap room, be in the heart of the culture, and you know, not have to go through the normal process of trying to find hotels and book a room and have availability and all that kind of stuff. So again, completely disrupted that marketplace and doing very well. And one that's rising hugely at the bottom of the heart there, this is Babylon Health. And again, a very prevalent one in the times that we're in when we're talking about healthcare. But essentially, this is access to a GP via your phone or laptop or whatever through video call, where they can diagnose you, treat you, and you can get prescriptions and stuff. And of course, they have a really, really strong AI, artificial intelligence model built into this, where, you know, it can already kind of predict what it is that you're, based on your symptoms and the information you put in, and you know, you can get to a diagnosis very, very quickly, sometimes without even having to speak to the doctor. So these are all very disruptive models. There's thousands more, but these are some of the famous ones that you might recognize.
Yeah, I think one thing that's probably worth mentioning on this slide as well is the report that Creighton Christensen actually put together when he discussed the idea of disruption and disruptive innovation. What he was actually talking about was corporate failures. In this case, it's particularly talking about Kodak, the camera manufacturer. And he said that basically their downfall, if you like, was because they were unaware of the disruptors that were starting to emerge in their industry. And we'll actually go a bit further into the idea of what happened with Kodak further into the slides. But a lot of these disruptors are people that just approach or come to that industry with a new idea or a new way of doing things, and completely disrupt how people see that industry, how people operate within that industry. And because it's new and because it's different, it grows very quickly. And the incumbents that are unwilling to adapt in the same way are very quickly displaced. So all of those brands down the side there, really what they offer is services that have existed for a very long time. We've always had home entertainment, we've always had taxis, we've always had hotels and accommodation providers. But because they were able to address what they found as pain points for consumers, and they found these consumer insights of how people wanted it to work, they were able to think differently about it, become disruptors in that industry. And now the idea of going to a Blockbuster rather than clicking on Netflix just seems ridiculous, because that is the new normal and how people operate within that industry now.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, and some examples of that are here. So this is a graph that comes from a company called Innovate, and this is looking at the Standard & Poor index, which is essentially the business index in America, the Standard & Poor 500. And what it shows here is the lifespan over a rolling 7-year average, the lifespan of an average corporate company. And as you can see, the trend is going downwards. This rolls all the way up to the future, early 2030, and you can see it's dropping down significantly. And the average lifespan of a company and how long it's lasting for is reducing massively, and that's because, as Jamie was just touching upon there, they're being disrupted. New companies are coming in, entering marketplaces and coming up with new values, new offers, new ways of doing things, and the people that held that position originally are unable to sustain and match and offer the same value, in which case the companies fail. And there's you see here on the right that the quote here is that half of the S&P 500 companies will be replaced over the next 10 years, many by companies which are yet to exist, which is quite a strong statement. But actually, if you look at the last maybe decade or probably 10 to 15 years, and you look at what we have in our lives now and the companies we're interacting with, particularly, if you think of your Facebooks or your PayPals or Apple or whatever, some of these companies were companies that didn't actually exist 10 or 15 years ago, and then came along and kind of dominated, and now it's part of our normal, and this is happening faster and faster all the time and coming about. So disruption is a real risk to all businesses of all sizes, and this is why you need to be pushing an innovation model throughout your company. So that's be disruptive. The next one, embrace digital. Focus on the word embrace. We don't say be digital, we say embrace digital. Nothing should be made digital for the sake of making it digital, but you would be doing yourself a disservice if you wasn't embracing the capabilities that are out there now in terms of digital technology and the advancements in this. And of course, we're using this every day in our daily lives, and so should be doing this within our business as well. But it has a place, and it has to be relevant. But again, going back to that disruption point, most of those disruptions come about because of digital capabilities, because what we're essentially able to do now, thanks to the internet and the capabilities of smartphones and new machine learning and all this kind of stuff, which we'll touch upon as we go. So embrace digital. So what do we mean? So digital, the use of a physical technology, hardware, or virtual technology, software to aid in the function or in a function or in an operation. So that's what we mean by digital. And as I say, we're using this pretty much all the time. We're doing this right now as you're watching this webinar. This is using digital, a software and a hardware to try and communicate a message across. And this image is a classic kind of old school shot, really, of going back to what the corporate environment or the office environment looked like not so long ago, really. You would have these big booths of lots of infrastructure, lots of people doing multiple tasks, trying to keep a company ticking over, because that's what the infrastructure provided, and that's what it needed. It needed a lot of manpower and a lot of machines and a lot of infrastructure to make things roll. Of course, now we're in an age where we can pretty much do all that here on a laptop. And most of you watching probably are experiencing this right now, especially because of the COVID thing, and you're having to work from home, and finding actually there's a lot that you can do with just access to the internet and your phone or your laptop. And with the various applications and software that's out there now, we can pretty much do everything either automated or rather quickly and integrated with everything else. So this is where we're at, and this is only going to continue to rise. I would actually say that I would predict that as we come out, there's lots of different messages about what kind of the new normal might be, etc., after COVID. But I would actually say that more and more larger companies, particularly, will have their people working at home and continue with this flow, because they found that actually, the infrastructure that they had in place really doesn't need to be there. There's not really a need often for lots and lots of people to be showing up to a building somewhere in a city centre. And of course, the knock-on effect of that is reducing travel, reducing costs, a better work-life balance, and all these other spin-offs from it. So I think this is actually how we'll start to move.
Yeah, I also think that the traditional way of running a business. So if you look at the previous model and this type of business model, not that long ago, this is what was needed to become anything of scale. So to become any kind of company that had a major growth in any industry, you would need to have this, and that also offered some form of security, because the smaller companies that were coming about and what we now call the disruptors within this industry, or within any industry, couldn't compete with this because they didn't have the money or the resources. They didn't have millions in the bank to pay for teams and infrastructure of this size. Where now, because a company of the same scale can be operated just through a laptop or through a mobile phone or through an iPad, the cost and the resources needed to develop a company and have that company grow to a significant scale is much less. So really, the next big idea can be formed from someone's back bedroom. It can grow quickly and it can disrupt companies that have been there for 10 years. And that's the realism of the world we live in. And a lot of these companies that we talk about, things like Airbnb, were created by, two guys in a dorm room in America on a laptop, and it's now a huge global company. So it really does give some weight to the idea of disruption and how easily disruptive things can be nowadays.
So embrace digital. And as we talk about this advancement, so we start moving into this kind of world, which funny little figure that you see on your screen here. So this comes from Google DeepMind. Essentially, this is kind of showing the capabilities of what's happening with technology now in terms of machine learning and machines being able to figure out how to solve problems almost with essentially without human intervention, and machine doing a lot of the work. It sounds a bit Terminator, doesn't it? But this is kind of some of the stuff that's going on. So this thing here is essentially a figure that they've put together, like a humanoid, if you like. And the task the machine was given was to get this little figure to move from point A to point B and figure out how to do it. Now, you and I would know that as walking. And of course, a human, typically takes, 10 months to a year to learn how to walk and move about and get from different from point A to point B and to get around. This machine did this in 3 hours. So essentially learned how to walk. It said, how do I get this from point A to point B, and discovered, okay, these are the limbs that I need to move, and this is how I project it forward and make the figure move. So this happened in the space of 3 hours. So, I mean, the capabilities and where we're going is just absolutely unreal. Jamie, I think I see people popping up just at the bottom. For some reason, I can't see the Q&A. My panel's gone for some reason, but maybe you can see it. So if you can field anything. That's
I'm just looking. There's a chat. I'm just trying to get the chat up to have a look. If there's any questions, what I'll do is I'll take note of them, and then throughout the slides, we'll try to answer any of the questions.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think you've got control of the screen. I'm not able to see that just yet, but will when I take over, we'll go through the questions first.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so and that technological advancement, so just to give you a little bit more background on this comes from a company called theemergingfuture.com. I highly recommend you look these up, actually, theemergingfuture.com, because they've got all sorts of information on their site about technology and the advancement, and some really great insights. And if you want to get some knowledge for your own business and some stimulus for this, it's really worth you having a look. But what this graph is showing is the rate of technological advancement and how this is moving forward. So as you can see on here, it's like within 5 years, we're going to be 32 times more advanced in our technological capability. But interestingly, if you start moving it forward, if this thing works, if you start moving it forward, in 10 years, we'll be 1,000 times more advanced. And then if you move it again, in 20 years, the same will be 1,000,000 times more advanced. So if you look at those curves, the spike is going rapid. It's moving very, very quickly. And that's because as we develop better understanding of technology and its capabilities and what we can do, in turn, we learn quicker and we become more advanced. So the advancement spikes very, very quickly. And actually on the actual website for this, actually goes on to 50, beyond 100, maybe 100 years or something. It goes on and predicts where we might be going. But the point of all this is that digital is here. It's really affecting how businesses work, how culture works, how the world works, and it's evolving rapidly. And so it's important to have a good understanding and bring it into your business, and it plays a crucial role in innovation.
Yeah, just before moving on as well, the main point to that research that they did is they were looking at how when we develop technology, that technology in turn helps us develop the next wave of technology. So if we look at things like the DeepMind computers that Google have developed, and there's quite a few super machine learning computers around now, because they're able to come up with solutions and come up with ideas quicker than we can, in some cases. What that report predicted was, as we develop more technology, that will help us develop quicker technology, better technology. Then, almost like a snowball effect, it will get faster and will develop much more quickly. And it essentially, they basically predicted that right now we're just at the very start of this digital revolution, and actually what we'll see is huge growth in digital over the next 5, 10, 20 years at a rate that we're not even capable of understanding just yet, because we haven't seen that technology.
Yeah. And this interesting looking thing on the screen here, so this brick of a phone was essentially the first touchscreen phone, called the Simon, and this was around 1991. And as you can see, you know, looking at this now and looking at what we're dealing with in our pockets today, it's a completely different world. But you know, this really wasn't so long ago, and it's a good example of the advancement of that technology. And of course, now we're in a world where we're looking at quite immersive stuff. So you'll have come across things like virtual reality, and you'll have heard terms like augmented reality and virtual environments and things like that, where, you know, like the lady on the screen here is using this to train to work on an engine, to be able to access things and touch things and be involved in these environments, all through a digital offer. So again, you know, it completely disrupts the whole training process and the need to have lots of people in a room working on a physical thing where it might cost a load of money. They're doing a lot of this in healthcare at the moment, you know, for surgeons, you know, so you can work on a heart or look at, you know, do brain surgery or whatever it might be, and completely, you know, and have no effect, you know, so it's completely safe, you know, kind of like being in a flying simulator or similar. And of course, all of this stuff crosses over different industries as well. And that's another thing to touch upon, is that, you know, what's the difference between putting a little camera, for example, down a lead pipe if you was a plumber, versus putting a little camera down your throat if you was a human? You know, the technology that allows for that to happen is the same thing, and it crosses over in all different sectors. So this kind of sharing knowledge and crossing over, and this, you know, thinking differently about what other people are doing and how we can adapt that. This just kind of highlights that point and links nicely onto the third D, which is think differently. And this is the tough one. It's really hard as a business to kind of change your thinking, because you're so used to working in a certain way. You've set up your business a certain way. The processes are in place. This is the way that we do things. And it's that age-old line, you know, if it isn't broke, don't fix it type thing. Unfortunately, though, that's the riskiest line. And this is why businesses are disrupted, because this comes about. So from an innovation point of view, we look at it from two sides. So there's those companies that, what we say, are playing not to lose. Okay, so these tend to be incumbent businesses, legacy businesses that have been around a long time. They usually have a staff role. They've got shareholders. They need to make their bonus. They've got KPIs to meet. They want to keep the profit ticking over, etc. And so these companies, when we say play not to lose, are essentially ring fencing. They're trying to maintain what they've got, stop the competitors coming in, stop anybody getting involved, and keep their business solid and going, and keep everybody happy, rolling in that way. However, on the flip side, if you used to flip the coin, you've got those companies that are playing to win. We call these the disruptors. These tend to be startups or younger companies that are emerging, going back to that graph earlier on, you know, in the last 10 years. And these are companies that essentially don't have those big infrastructures. Usually they don't have loads of staff. They don't have a building to, you know, to support. You know, they're not answerable to anybody, and essentially they can try stuff, and they try to disrupt the market. They look at what's happening in the marketplace and they say, well, I know that by using this I can create a new value proposition here, and I'm gonna throw it out there, and I've kind of got nothing to lose. And they eventually disrupt the marketplace, and it's really choosing which side of the coin you want to be on. Now, what I would say is that if you are at one of those legacy companies, you've been around, and by legacy, you might think of like very famous businesses, I don't know, like GSK, who make pharmaceuticals, or big retailers or whatever. If you are one of them companies, that doesn't mean that you can't be a disruptor. It just means that you've got to put a little bit of time into build a culture of innovation within your organization, so that actually you can have a disruptive edge. And of course, you actually, if you're in this position, you actually have more power, because you tend to have the infrastructure, you tend to have the money, you tend to have the resource to be able to try stuff out. It's the thinking that usually stops these companies from doing that, because they're too worried about losing what they've already got. And that's the change that has to be made. And it leads on nicely to this nice quote that came from Sophie Hackford, who's the editor at Wired magazine, a big tech magazine. And one of our guys went to a presentation she was doing. And this quote here says, legacy companies have too much to gain from the present to think too much about the future. And it, ain't that the truth? That's exactly it. If you're making money, you're trying to maintain your business, you don't want to go out of business, you want to keep moving forward, then what you tend to do is say, don't break it, keep this rolling, and not sort of think too much about actually what's out there, almost a bit of a blinkered vision. And that's what's got to change if you're going to advance forward. And referencing back to Kodak, so as Jamie was touching upon earlier on, and I think that Kristen Clayton was referencing, this is an example of one of those legacy companies. So for those of you that remember, Kodak made film, for cameras, traditional film, and that was a big business, and they did very, very well, and we're the fourth in the world to do with that. But that's where their focus remained. Now, interestingly, there's an ironic thing to this, in that Kodak actually came up with the first digital camera. This chap here is what he has on screen here. So they actually produced the first digital camera, and were the ones that came up with the technology and to enable this to happen. Now, unfortunately, they didn't act upon it, and they didn't move upon this. So whilst they'd come up with the concept, they didn't want to pull away from the thing that was making them money, essentially, their core business, which is we make film, we do it well, and we're known for that, and that's what we do. Unfortunately, that was to their detriment, because then other players came in the market, those disruptors. They knew the technology was there, they jumped upon it, and digital cameras came about. And of course, now most of us are using cameras on our phones, etc. And the need for film is pretty low, unless you're a sort of specialist photographer, or you're particularly into it as a hobby or whatever. That demand just plummeted, and that was it for Kodak, unfortunately. And there's lots more examples of this happening in all different industries. But going back to that point of saying, if you're a legacy company, you have got the ability to be disruptive yourself and do something different with the market, just as these guys did. But then you've got to act upon it. You've got to be brave, you've got to be bold, and you've got to put some time in and build a bit of a portfolio of different ideas out there, so that you're in a position to be moving forward. So yeah, this leads us on to some sort of practicalities here, which is innovation essentials, and we're going to talk about how we can take some of that background that I've just given you there and put it into a little bit of practice, so you can implement it into your own business. So I'll hand over to Jamie, who's going to touch upon this, and hopefully give you some insight that you can take away. Jamie?
Yeah, thank you. I'll just see if I can see what that message was. Well, I think we have a question. If you could...
Sorry, I've got it now.
Ah, yeah, so I've got it. Cool. Right. Yeah, so what we've gone through there with the 3Ds, that is really the mindset that starts innovation. It's that starting point of understanding the way to think about it, and being in the right mindset so that you're open to those new ideas and new technologies. But even with that mindset, there is some fundamental things that your business needs to have in order to facilitate that innovation and see it through to a working project. So we also, there's 3 key essentials for innovation to happen within your organization, which is the strategy, the process, and most importantly, the culture. And what we'll go through each of these and give you some examples of how you can address these and how you could implement these within your own organization. So first of all, when we talk about strategy, what we're talking about is the direction that your business is aiming to go in. So what is the unified message that gives your company purpose, that unifies everyone that's there, and what is you trying to achieve? Now, the easiest way to do this is something that we call the brand triangle. So on the right, I've put an example, and this is actually for an innovation company like ourselves. But there's lots of variations, and you can just Google it and find tools and things to create these yourself. But with this, the idea is that the very top triangle that you see here, that is highlighting the purpose of your brand, what it is that you are trying to achieve. And in theory, this is something that should almost be unachievable. It should be that very top level thing. So, for example, if you are, to take Wayne's example from earlier, GSK, a big pharmaceutical company, that in that vision, that company purpose could be to make sure that everyone in the world is healthy. Now, if they achieve that, they've essentially put themselves out of business, but that is their reason for existing, and they continue to try to do things to achieve that. Then underneath that, we have goals, which are things that they're the stepping stones to achieve that vision. So it could be creating better pharmaceuticals or looking at preventative health or whatever it may be. Those can always be changed. And underneath that is the foundation, which is the processes that are needed in order to facilitate those goals. Now, for a lot of companies, especially when facing disruption, COVID, for example, is a fantastic example. Well, fantastic, maybe not the best word to use, but it's a good example of disruption, because almost every industry across the world has been disrupted. And when they're looking at how they can adapt what they're doing, how they can innovate and do something differently, looking at this kind of model can be really useful. And I'll give you some examples. So if we look at Dyson, for example, we all know Dyson as people that make vacuum cleaners and things for the home. But Dyson actually set up to be a technology company that created things to improve people's lives. That was their mantra. And as part of that, some of those goals were to create things for the home and to create things for better life and all the rest of it. So when COVID came about and they needed to change what they were doing and needed to look at new business models, they looked at what do we have at our disposal now, what capabilities and resources do we have, and what can we do to basically make people's lives better. And this is why they started producing ventilators using the technology and the skills that they already had. They just thought slightly differently about their assets, how they could use them in a different way, and they were able to produce something completely new. And a more local example, so Drive is here in Hull where we are, is our version of Uber. So it's a taxi company, and they use an app to order taxis, much like Uber would. So in itself, it's very innovative anyway for a local provider. But when COVID came about, they weren't able to operate in the way they were operating anymore. People weren't going out, people weren't, going to the bars on weekends and things. So their business model was massively disrupted. So when they looked at their business model, they said, well, what do we do? Essentially, we're a transportation company. We get something from A to B. So taking that business model and the assets they had and the resources at their disposal, they created something called Drive Delivers, which the idea was looking at the consumer needs, which was people needed shopping, people need things taken to and from houses, but they wanted to do it in a secure way. Drive basically created that service, set up the car so that they would be safe for people to do so, and we're able to continue functioning and making money during that time of disruption.
Sorry, Jamie, just before you move on, so just to go back to that triangle. So when you go back to that vision at the top, that brand vision, as Jamie touched upon there, if you can sort of define why it is that you're actually in business, for what reason, so forgetting your products, forgetting your service, forgetting your offer, why the business, what does the business actually do, for the person you're selling to, what improvement does it make to their lives? If you can think like that and then think about what infrastructure you currently have, so what skills you have in your people, what you have in your building, what you have in machinery, what you have in assets, whatever it is that you do, and then think, how can I repurpose that to apply it to something else? And Jamie touched upon the thing there with COVID and Dyson, and there's been lots of other examples, Formula One and lots of other companies are all doing stuff. There's a lot of clothing companies making PPE and masks and all of this sort of stuff. But if you can think in that way, then all of a sudden you can start realizing how you can apply a new value to the consumer using what you already have. If you think of a vacuum cleaner, essentially, if I can make something that sucks and blows, so to speak, then if you can move that to a ventilator, that's ultimately what it does. It sucks and blows. So you think, okay, so how can I reapply that thinking, that technology into something that is needed or will add a value? And so the pandemic very much highlighted that, and pretty much everyone was thinking in that way. So, you know, going back to that top level of the triangle, really take that vision and think, what actually is it that we do? And when you've got that, then you can really reapply where you might take that.
Yeah, probably worth mentioning, it doesn't have to be in the face of a crisis either.
No,
the whole
in
concept,
any form of life, in any way, yeah.
So if we maybe take a slightly less COVID example, if you look at something like Amazon, their whole purpose was to be the most complete and convenient shopping platform out there that everyone bought everything from. So with that vision in mind, you know, creating things like the smart home assistants that you could, through conversation, order things through, and you know, they're looking at drone deliveries and all the rest of it. They were able to think like that and think of new ideas because they had that vision, that purpose in mind, what their end goal was and what they wanted to achieve. And then look at kind of what they had at their disposal and how they could enhance that, build on it, or create something completely new that complemented what they already had. So we have used some very COVID-related examples, but it can be just general innovation as well. And once we've established that strategy and that thing that brings everything together, the next step is the process. And this is looking at, if you want to innovate, do you actually have the processes in place within your organization to facilitate this? So for example, an ideation process, do you have a way of applying some form of framework or some organization to that ideation so that you can identify ideas, put things together, look at how that would benefit your business? Important things like selection and how you actually decide whether that's a good idea for you. Do you have time set aside to do it? You know, do people feel comfortable to take time out of their day-to-day to come up with a concept or an idea? You know, some businesses that we've spoke to, they tend to have, you know, maybe a set time where maybe just once a week for an hour, they'll all sit down as an organization, discuss where their company is at that point and where they can go to move forward. A lot of companies do it digitally, so it could be a digital platform or tool where people can add their ideas to it. The most famous example is Google. So they developed something called the 80-20 rule. And the way that works is when you work for Google, 80% of your time is spent on whatever your job description is, whatever it is that your day-to-day job is. 20% of the time is for you to decide what you think is the thing that Google should be looking at and working on. And the majority of Google's sort of ideas and concepts and products have actually come from various staff members during that 20% of time. Now, obviously, that's quite a luxury. Google can afford to do that. Not every company can afford to give a big chunk of time away to their employees to do that. But there is other ways of doing it through digital means of things. Project management is looking at, when you've come up with that idea and you've that concept, can you actually take it further than an idea or a concept? Do you actually have the things in place to implement that, you know, assigning teams to it, or looking at vendors that can actually provide that solution for you? Because a lot of the times there'll be people that will have this idea, but that idea will stay on someone's notepad somewhere for a year or two and never really become anything more. So it's the process of actually being able to take that through to something that's ready for market. And finally, the biggest constraint for most things within an organization is budgets. Do you have budgets set aside for investigating new ideas? Are you aware of funding that's available so that you can look at new ideas and grow what you're doing? And that's something that we'll touch upon later on. And having all these things in place so that when you have those concepts, when you have the need and the want to innovate, you're actually set up as an organization to do it. And it's not just a nice talking point. It is actually part of what you do as a business. And finally, and for us, this is the key and the most important thing when it comes to innovating and keeping your business relevant. And that's the culture. And we really see this as the cornerstone of any successful innovation and any growth. So you could have the best strategy or the best process in the world, but if you don't have the right culture within your business and within your leadership teams, this will never happen or become anything. And most people will know of companies that, you know, you would consider as sort of set in the ways, that don't want to change, that would maybe not embrace someone who did want to come in and think of new ideas. And this can really be a huge factor in success and growth. And just to give an example of that and why culture is one of those big deciding factors. So these two companies, EA Games and Valve, are essentially game development companies. So they make video games that people play. And there was a point in time where people were kind of fighting for that top spot, who was what we call the AAA game developer. So like, one of the, who essentially create like the blockbuster style games. And both these companies took very different approaches to doing this. So EA Games' approach was, okay, well, let's get out as many games as possible in the fastest time and essentially flood the market with our games. And in doing so, what they ended up doing is putting a huge amount of pressure on their team and people that worked within the team and their developers. They were looking at how they can make more money from it. So they started including what we now call in-app purchases or in-game purchases, so that they were trying to make money from people that had already bought their product. And basically what happened was there was a huge backlash. The developers started speaking out, saying how horrible it was to work there. They were putting less effort into the products they were making, so the games ended up being pretty awful anyway. And it actually became a bit of a trend on the internet that if it's an EA game, it will be pretty awful. And there was a whole series of memes and funny images created on the internet to that effect, where people saw the company as a company that was there to make money, just send as many games out as possible, and they wouldn't be any good. Valve, on the other hand, they wanted to focus on the creative element and the quality of the games they produce. So their approach was to focus on the culture, their internal culture, and really utilize the assets they had as a company. So they spoke to all their developers, and they created essentially a culture hand guide, which you can actually find this online if you look for Valve Culture Guide. It's a free PDF you can download, but they give everyone a book, and the concepts are within that book, where from now on, only work on projects you feel passionate about. If you like the idea of a game, or you like the idea of a concept that we've thought of, go and work on that. If you don't feel passionate about it, leave it and someone else will pick it up. Their thinking was, if there was a concept they spoke about and nobody really liked the idea of it, it probably wouldn't be a good game anyway. So they didn't bother producing it. They told people to really focus on making it a game they would enjoy and that they would want to be part of. And what ended up happening is the quality of their games became so well known that even today, when Valve release a game, people will go and download that game because it's a Valve game and they'll assume it's going to be pretty good. And they essentially became one of the top AAA game developers, where EA, even today, still have a pretty bad rep within the industry because of the culture. So in this particular example, the way they looked at their culture and the way that they used their internal assets was really the deciding factor, not just between success, but also the damage it did to EA, who even years later are still trying to recover from the bad reputation that was caused. And another great example of this is Facebook. So when someone is employed by Facebook, when you join Facebook, you basically get given this, which is, they call it the little red book. Within this is essentially quotes and bits of information that really sum up the culture and the beliefs of working at Facebook. And right in the middle of this book, right in the centerfold, when you open it, on a plain black page, is the words, "If we don't create the thing that kills Facebook, someone else will." And what this is, they're trying to ingrain right from the very start when someone comes into their company, the idea that there will be other people that try to disrupt this. There will be other people that could develop the next new thing that takes Facebook from that position of power to, as they describe it, disappearing without even leaving ruins. So why can't that be Facebook themselves? If an industry needs to be disrupted, it can be by the people within that industry. And they really spend a lot of time ingraining this into their culture, and getting people to think in this way, so that hopefully they are never disrupted, or they're always the ones that think of that next big thing. And I think now they're at that point where they don't need to do that. They can just buy the next big thing. But as a culture, it was a good idea to start with. So basically, to address this, how do you actually implement a positive innovation culture within your company? We developed what we call the culture formula, and this is basically ways to break down the culture you have now, address any barriers, and create a culture where as we call it, innovation is always on. So people are always thinking of ways they can improve things. They're always trying to give their insights, and they want to be part of that. And so we break it down to essentially the positive factors, taking away the restrictions that stop them wanting to do that. So the positive factors are aspiration and affirmation. So when we look at aspiration, we're talking about the idea that people want to be seen as doing more than they are. They want to be seen as achieving something, and want to be proud in the work they do. So it's about the motivation that they're given. Are they congratulated for achieving something? Are they do they receive anything in return for the hard work that they're putting in? And influence. And this is quite a big one as well, the idea of influence. If you have someone that starts a new job and is super excited and really wants to make their mark, but when they go there, the rest of the people within that organization just want to get on with the job and they're not interested in anything new, and you have this negative culture, that will then influence the new people there. And having that positive culture shared across all employees is key. It's not just about the new hires, it's not just about leadership, it's about everybody. And equally, if you have staff that want to do that but the leadership aren't interested, again, that will have negative influence on that. The opposite side of that is affirmation, as well as, people want to be seen as achieving these things, but also people want to fit in. So traditions and trends of how things have always been done and how their colleagues are doing things also plays a major role. So again, if they're trying to do things in a better way, but the tradition is, no, we do it like this, that can be a barrier. So it's about changing all of that and looking at how that can be more open-minded. So traditions can change, trends can change, people are open to those ideas. And then the big thing, and this is the hardest bit, is removing the restrictions. So any economic factors, so if there's just no budget or no interest or no way to look at new ideas, nobody will do it. If they don't have time to look at those ideas or think of new things, nobody will do it. And the major thing being fear of failure. If someone comes up with a concept and they try it and it maybe isn't the correct idea, it doesn't work, are they scared they're going to lose the job? Is that something that they feel at risk for doing, or is it something that they're congratulated for trying to develop something new? So especially with legacy companies, people don't want to rock the boat because they have a nice job. They think they're paid every month. They want the next promotion, and they know the best way to do that is keep their head down and do whatever they're told to do during that time period. Where actually companies should be encouraging and supporting people that want to push that to the next level and do more, and shouldn't fear the idea of failing in doing that if something doesn't work. So once we have all those are what we class as the innovation essentials, the things that your company needs in order to facilitate innovation. Then what we're talking about is the ideas, and how do you actually develop these ideas. It's great just getting everyone in a room and saying, okay, think of something creative, but how do you develop an idea that actually achieves something for your business and for your consumers? And the way we do this is through what we call stimulus and insight. And it's very important that we look at both of these and how these work together. So when we're talking about stimulus is essentially like the inspiration, the thing that gives you the starting point to think differently. So that could be a new technology or science you've seen, new materials, new markets that are opening up that wasn't available before, business models that you've maybe not explored, even things like maybe your competitors or other industries are doing, and parallel industries, and lots of other things that may give you that starting idea that opened up your mind to think slightly differently. Now, this is normally where a lot of people will stop. They'll use that inspiration. They'll say, okay, well, apps or AI or whatever is this great new thing, let's go and implement it. But where we get the real value, and normally what decides whether that idea will succeed or fail or have the adoption within the industry, is the insight. And when we talk about insight, what we're talking about is looking at the consumer needs, pain points, things that will add value to the consumer, and how you can use that technology to and that insight and bring them together to develop something new. So I'll go through some examples of insights, and how to identify these insights, because with stimulus it's fairly easy. You'll have all seen new technology and new ideas, and we're bombarded all the time through the internet. But being able to identify the insights that really add value to those ideas is a little bit harder. So the way that we do is a tool that we call the 5 E's of consumer needs. So these are the 5 things that in most cases for most industries will add value to a consumer. So this would be ease, entertainment, economic factors, education and ecosystem. And just to explain them a little bit so that you've got a better understanding, when we're talking about ease, it's exactly how it sounds. It's making that product, that service more efficient, quicker, more user-friendly. So a lot of the innovations we see nowadays use this consumer insight to improve an industry. So if we look at Uber, for example, they recognize that it was a pain point for people, having to ring up taxi companies, wait for them, not knowing how long they're going to take. If they've had a couple of drinks and they're stood outside in the cold, they're kind of wondering, where's my taxi? How long is it going to take? And they took all that information and they kind of created a platform that removed all those pain points, made it much easier for people to access the service through digital payments and things. And obviously massively disrupted that industry. And that's the case for a lot of the services we see nowadays. Entertainment is another element, and it doesn't actually have to be providing entertainment. It could be a facilitator to entertainment. So now people expect more in terms of content and access to content. So that's why we see huge growth in things like Spotify, Netflix, iTunes, all the various streaming platforms and entertainment platforms that exist. So if you can provide something that basically makes people happy in a nice, easy to use way, again, you've massively increasing your chances of adoption. It could also just mean making the experience of your service slightly more fun or interesting to a consumer. So if there's a way that you can add another element to it that just adds that extra element of entertainment to whatever it is you provide, that can also really improve adoption. Economic is the obvious one. If you could do it in a cheaper way, if you could do it in a more cost-effective way, where the consumer feels they've got better value for money, you will always see better adoption. And one of the big things within this need at the moment is subscription services and alternative payment methods. So one of the things that most people like about Uber, for example, is they don't need to carry cash on them. They've put the card details into the phone, and when the taxi drops them off, the money just comes out. They don't have to think about it. They don't have to carry the cash. So looking at how you can make that platform or make that service more economic and also make it more convenient for a customer when it comes to payment is always a great way to get people to take notice of what you're doing. Education isn't really, it comes down to the idea of information and access to information. And this is one that a lot of people kind of forget, but actually is probably one of the biggest consumer value adds at the moment, and the thing that is drawing people into new technologies. So if we consider things like this on my wrist, like a Fitbit or a smartwatch, arguably Fitbit has done more for health and preventative health than anything before it, despite the fact it does nothing in ways to address the health issue. It does nothing to improve your health. It purely provides information and adds gamification elements so that you can see how many steps you've done, how many calories you've burned. It adds an element of competition so that you can see your friends and how many they've done. I made the mistake of adding all my family to it. So every couple of days I'll get a message from, my mum from wherever she is, taunting me that I've not done as many steps as she has. So it's convincing people to think differently about that. purely by giving them access to information and data about the way they're living. And we're seeing a massive growth in this all the time.
Yeah, Jamie, just on that one, just before you go to the last one, yeah, all you Strava users out there, there's loads of them. Our other colleague, Rob, who's usually on these calls, he's a huge Strava user and loves to be out on his bike. But that's a really good example of great competition and monitoring. But as Jamie says, actually, the app doesn't actually do anything. All it does is educate you, just tells you what you've done on your bike, on your walk, on your run, or whatever it is you've done on that particular day. But it can't make you go on the bike, it can't make you take a run, and it can't make you go for a swim. You know, all of that is actually you're responsible for your own health. But strangely enough, when you have the information provided to you and you're educated on it, and also there's an element of gamification or competition or whatever it might be, it's a stimulus for you to then act upon it, because it's within our nature to react to the information that we're being provided. So yeah, it doesn't always have to do anything physical. It just needs to provide knowledge, and that really is powerful for the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. And the final thing, and this is actually something that is more prevalent nowadays than it may have been even a couple of years ago, is the idea of ecosystems. So now people aren't just looking for a piece of technology or a service that does something. They want to know how it ties in with their existing ecosystems. So for example, probably the most well-known ecosystem is like the Apple ecosystem. If you are an Apple user, if you have a Mac, if you have an iPhone, if you have an iPad, you use iTunes, if you're looking at a brand new watch or a smartwatch, chances are you're almost 100% likely to go and get an Apple Watch because you're already in that ecosystem. Why would you look outside of it? And we're seeing more and more of these integrated ecosystems about. So things like the Amazon Home automation system. I won't say the name in case anyone's got one. And all these voice assistants we have in the house, Siri that people may have on the phones, Android, whatever it may be. We're really getting invested in ecosystems now as technology increases. So looking at how you can implement what you do within those ecosystems and how people already operate. Maybe your industry has an ecosystem that's popular. I work a lot within the creative industry, and everyone uses the Adobe suite, everyone uses Adobe Photoshop and whatever. And over the years, there's been lots of people trying to combat that and say, okay, well, we'll create a new platform, but it doesn't fit in with the ecosystem, so nobody adopts it. So considering what the ecosystems your consumers already use are and what is valuable to them could be a huge swaying factor in whether they use your service or a competitor's. So just to sort of highlight that, if we look back at what I've just said, so the stimulus, which is like what we describe as like the inspiration, looking at those new technologies and things, is really the fuel for an idea, is the thing that kind of gets it started. But the insight is the spark that really sets it off. And it's really important that we use that insight to inform us as to which ideas to run with, and create something that actually has value. And the way that we see it is the stimulus plus the insight and those consumer needs is meaningful innovation. So it's not just innovation, it's meaningful innovation, something that means something to you, to the income that you can generate from it, and of course to your consumers. And this is what we try to work through with our clients and people we work with. It's not just about coming up with something that's cool and new, it's about coming up with something that is also meaningful. So just two examples of how that was used. So if you look at on the left, we obviously have the iPod. Now, when the iPod came about, back when MP3 players was still a thing and people going out and buying them, there were lots of competition. There's lots of people developing better and better MP3 players all the time. But the insight that iTunes had, or sorry, that Apple had, was that people didn't really like the idea of going to record stores anymore, getting CDs just to copy maybe 2 or 3 songs they liked from that CD. This was actually one of the main catalysts for why illegally downloading music became so popular. People sometimes just wanted a song and they didn't want to go out and buy a full album for it. People wanted to have access to more music. So in order to combat that, Apple came up with the idea of iTunes, and they basically sold them as a package thing. So you get your iPod, but that was connected to iTunes. iTunes let you essentially stream before streaming was a big thing, but pick those songs, have them onto your iPod. And obviously they kind of dominated that industry because they used that consumer pain point to develop something slightly different that disrupted the entire industry. Similarly, Microsoft tried to do something with the Zune, which maybe 2 or 3 people might know, but it kind of just died. Because although it was very similar in capabilities to the iPod had that thing, they had that hook, which was the iTunes, and it completely destroyed all the competition that they had. Dyson, looking at more of a physical example, they were looking at sort of pain points that consumers had with hoovering and hoovering around the house. And very small things like people never knew when the bag was full. So people were hoovering and getting to a point where the bag was kind of bursting at the seams before they were emptying it. So they used clear glass in order to be able to see into the compartment and know when it needed to be emptied. They looked at new fan technology that was more powerful than competition. So they were looking at competitive insight there. And things like people trying to get it around their house. So Dyson started creating some of the first wireless, cordless vacuum cleaners. And now we still know Dyson is probably one of the key players in that industry, and probably one of the most innovative. But all of that was actually spurred on by consumer insights they had picked up from their customers. And something as small as, I don't know when to change the bag, has led to now what was probably one of the most recognizable features of all Dyson vacuum cleaners, and probably something that everyone recognizes as part of their brand. So, you know, it's really important to try and tie those two together and try and collect that insight and stimulus together. So now what we're going to look at is essentially a process of bringing all this together. So we've talked about the way of thinking about all this stuff. We've talked about the essentials your company needs to facilitate it. We've talked about how to start those ideas and how to actually know that you're looking at the right idea. Now we're actually going to talk about a process which will allow you to run through essentially an innovation workshop within your own team or with external teams and develop an idea that you can take to market. And we do this through what we call scopes. So scopes to us are kind of a snapshot of different areas of the business and looking at how you can innovate in each of those areas. And we find that this helps to create a little bit more of a focus on what it is that you're doing, and almost create some barriers so that whatever ideas you're thinking of are addressing those insights, and they are adding to that company vision that we said at the beginning. And the way we do this is we look at a business sort of as a tree. So if you imagine your business as a tree, then we can use this to identify potential areas to innovate. And we break it down into 3 sections. So we have the roots, the core, and the outreach. So the roots, if we look at that as the core of a tree, it's the roots of a tree. This is essentially the foundation of your company. It's the bit behind the scenes that nobody really sees, but is essential for you to operate and do what you do. So this would be things like your company structure, your infrastructure, your profit models, the skill sets that you have, the way you maybe manufacture your products, all these things that essentially make you capable of doing whatever your core business function is. Then when we move up, we have the core, and this is essentially the main thing that you offer to your consumers, to your customers. So that could be your product, your service, but it's essentially, it's the first thing that anyone will see from your brand. It's the thing that they interact with. And finally, the outreach. When we talk about this, we're talking about how you're addressing new consumers, basically. So how you are branding that, the marketing of it, the delivery systems of actually getting that product to a consumer. And really anything that is very external to you or your existing consumers. We actually have a much more in-depth process for this, which we call the Eve methodology, and this is something we work through with our clients. But what we're talking about here is just like this top level, so these 3 pillars of innovation. And if you are able to essentially run the process I'm about to go through with you in a second, through each of these areas. So if you look at how you can innovate the roots of your business, so your manufacturing techniques, your profit models, how you can innovate your core product and your service to your customers, and how you can innovate on the outreach and how you actually reach those new customers and those unmet markets that you're not currently in. That's the difference between essentially what we call transactional innovation, which is just doing kind of a single innovation, like I don't know, if you make toothpaste, changing the flavor of the toothpaste, to creating something bigger and actually creating an ecosystem of innovation. So you're actually creating a new business model and much more something that more people will be likely to buy into and develop further in the future. So the way we do this is through what we call a sprint. So the idea of innovation sprints was actually made popular by Google and similar companies. And they essentially took all of their creative team and all their ideation and split it into a 5-step process. Now, this 5-step process actually you can do over any period of time. The Google suggestion is that you do 1 day for each. Unfortunately, not every business has the luxury of spending 5 days developing new ideas. But you can actually do this over 1 day or 1 afternoon or even just an hour, and just assign in a little bit of time to each of these 5 steps. And these steps we kind of go through a lot of the ideas that I've already spoken about throughout this presentation. So the first is what we call download. And this is basically gathering all the information and all the knowledge that will allow you to ideate and think of new ideas. And this is where the insight and stimulus comes into play. It's where looking at the 5 E's that we mentioned comes into play. Looking at trends and also looking at what your competitors are doing and what the actual market's doing. And this is really kind of like a cramming session where you are just getting everyone on the same page, so everyone is completely informed of all the things that they need to know in order to start thinking differently. Then basically we take that to the ideation phase, and this is kind of like the more fun step. This is where no idea is a bad idea. It's about taking one of those insights or one of those bits of stimulus and looking at, okay, how can we think differently about that to develop something new? And at this point, we always say to people, go crazy. Even if you think it's completely impossible, suggest anything you can. Let's just get everything out. And really try to expand people's minds and how they're thinking about things. Once we've got all that, we tend to do it by just writing on whiteboards or sticking it on pieces of paper. Then we get to selection. And the key thing with selection, there's 2 ways of doing this, or 2 ways that we see people do this. One is essentially whoever is the highest ranking person in the room just kind of says, yep, that's the idea I like. Now that tends to happen in most businesses. Unfortunately, that is just not the best way of doing it. So what we suggest to people is creating a selection matrix or some form of selection process where you, at the start of the process, look at what are the key things you want to achieve. Is it increased revenue? Is it more new customers? Is it getting into new markets? Looking at maybe barriers, things like how much would it cost to produce? Do you have the skill sets in-house? Do you need to go out external? And all the ideas you've got, putting them onto this matrix and looking at which basically scores the highest based on what it is you're aiming to achieve. Sometimes it's not always the idea that's the coolest or that everybody kind of wants to do, but it's the one that will have the best results for you and your organization. Once we have those ideas, we then tend to work with clients to prototype them. So prototyping is something that you don't need, app developers and engineers and things to do. You can do in your own business with a whiteboard and a pen, and it could be as simple as drawing out the screen of an app, for example, if that was the concept that was developed, and saying, well, this button would do this, this is how it would work, we'd get consumers to do this. It's basically showing that idea in a way that people can perceive it quickly, understand it, and start to recognize the value of it. And then finally, we take that prototype and it would be tested. And again, if this is something you want to do within your own companies, you don't need to go into the whole thing of getting focus groups and sending it out to lots of people. You could just do this within your own team. So one way of doing this is having everyone create some form of prototype, poster, drawing, or whatever it is of their idea, putting them all up on the wall and giving everyone some stickers or something, and everyone goes and puts the sticker next to the idea that they think works the best, that they think is the best idea. And that could be a way of testing and gathering feedback on that prototype. And the key thing with this is it's actually a circular process. So we've put it in this kind of straight line, but actually the idea is it can always be reworked and changed. So if you get to the prototyping stage, you draw something out and think, do you know what, actually, no, this just won't work. Then you go back to the ideation phase or maybe the selection phase, and you select another idea, or you ideate again. And you go around this cycle until you have an idea that you think is the correct one for your business. We do say to people though that, you know, there does need to be a cut off, because there is some companies that will just keep going around in cycles forever. Sometimes an idea or a concept just doesn't work and it needs to be dropped, but it shouldn't be the thing of an A to B process. We should sort of go around in cycles and adapt what it is that we're doing.
Yeah, Jamie, can I just add a couple of points to this, just on the sprint process? One thing to bear in mind is it's not always about using it to develop new stuff as well. It might be to address a problem that you have within the business. And again, just referring back to the whole pandemic situation, as it's still in everybody's head, using the sprint process might be one way to work out how you diversify your offer during a period when you're unable to put it out there. So if you're an entertainment venue and you need people coming through the door, for example, and you can't get that, how can you ideate to offer something different using what you have? Remember earlier on in the conversation, we were saying about the vision. What is it that your business is set up to do? What is it to make people happy? Is it to make people healthy? Is it to make cleaning the house easier? Whatever, you know, what is it that actually you're set up to do? And using this, you can start thinking about that. Okay, so we can't do things the way we've been doing it. So let's use this sprint process with all of our people involved to come up with new ways to use what we're doing and create a new offer. And in terms of the prototyping, it might be that actually you draw it. The best way to think of prototyping, doing it within your own organization, is imagine Dragon's Den. That's probably the easiest way to do it, is think, how would I take this concept that we've selected, we've worked on, we've taken all the insight and the stimulus out there, we've come up with some ideas, we've selected what we think are the top 5 ideas or whatever based on some form of matrix or scoring system or however you want to do it. And then you've got to show that to someone to say, okay, this is what we've got. This is kind of what it looks like. Now, if you used to do that in a Dragon's Den format, for example, you would, and you didn't have you weren't building anything. It might be something that you have drawn out. It might be a poster. It might be a little video that you make on your phone. How do you articulate that and get it a point to say, this is what it is. This is why it's good for us. And this is why we should do it. And thinking in that kind of light is a really good way to get something across. And then when you're testing it as well within your own organization, you might go to stakeholders. So you might go to the leads of each area of the business, maybe someone in marketing, maybe someone in HR, maybe someone in production or whatever it might be. And each of them will have their own input in terms of what you've presented them as to how it would affect their department. But it also might be going down, if you sell a product, you might be going down standing in the supermarket shelf next to consumers and watching them shopping for which type of toilet roll they want, or whatever it is that you make, and asking them the question and saying, well, why that one? What is it about that that's making that easier? And asking them, this is what we've come up with. Would this work for you? It doesn't have to be massive. It's just tiny little steps. And particularly outside the organization as well, asking your family, asking your friends, asking other people in different industries. We've got this. What does this look like to you? It's a really good way to collect insight.
Yeah, So I was just about to say that this sprint process, actually, there's 2 ways of looking at this. So, as Wayne's just mentioned, there you can have an issue or something that you want to directly address. So, for example, if we've been disrupted by COVID, how do we think differently about it? You could run this process with your download being collecting information about how COVID is affecting your business, what is available on the market and things that you could do differently, and then running this process with that in mind to develop a solution to that problem. Or alternatively, if it isn't something directly you want to address, you are just looking at what opportunities do I have as an industry or as a business to innovate. This is where the scopes that we mentioned earlier come into play. You can take those 3 elements of your business, so the roots, the core, and the outreach, take one at a time, run a sprint on each, and essentially develop new ideas across your entire business or organization, and develop something completely new just based on your knowledge and your insights and the inspiration for things that you found. So it can be to address a direct problem, or it could be open innovation. It could be, let's just look at what ideas we can come up with to push things further forward. And really that is, oh, sorry, change my screen. That is the difference between what we said earlier, where it's the transactional innovation and actually developing an innovation ecosystem where you take all those scopes and you create innovation that starts at the very roots of your business and goes all the way out to how your consumers interact with it. All right, so I'll just play you this this example. So this is from a company called Dollar Shave Club, which a lot of you may have seen, and they basically, what we're going to do is show you this and then go through the scopes that would have been used to address this, and show you kind of how you can put that into practice. So if I just, let me just put the sound on so you can hear that. There we go. If anyone's got any issues with hearing this, just raise your hand, and we'll address it.
Jamie, you need to set the sound off, take your music off.
Right, thanks.
Hi, I'm Mike, founder of DollarShaveClub.com. What is DollarShaveClub.com? Well, for $1 a month, we send high-quality razors right to your door. Yeah, $1. Are the blades any good? No. Our blades are f***ing great. Each razor has stainless steel blades, an aloe vera lubricating strip, and a pivot head. It's so gentle a toddler could use it. And do you like spending $20 a month on brand name razors? 19 go to Roger Federer. I'm good at tennis.
And do you think your razor needs a vibrating handle, a flashlight, a back scratcher, and 10 blades? Your handsome-ass grandfather had 1 blade and polio. Looking good, pop-up! Stop paying for shave tech you don't need. And stop forgetting to buy your blades every month. Alejandro and I are going to ship them right to you. We're not just selling razors, we're also making new jobs. Alejandro, what were you doing last month?
Not working.
What are you doing now?
Working.
I'm no Vanderbilt, but this train makes hay. So stop forgetting to buy your blades every month and start deciding where you're going to stack all those dollar bills I'm saving you. We are DollarShaveClub.com, and the party is on.
Right, so looking at that business model, so probably a lot of you people have seen Dollar Shave Club, and there's actually a lot of replicas in the UK now, so we have Harry's and Cornerstone and similar things. But actually the guy that created that worked for Gillette, and during his time working at Gillette, he was able to recognize all these kind of pain points and insights from consumers there. So Gillette's business model was originally based on the idea of upselling you the next razor, so the one with, you know, the next amount of razors on it, or the next attachments, or whatever it was, to a point where it became so expensive to replace those razors or to get the next one that people were using substandard razors and keeping them for as long as possible, because they didn't want to spend 20 quid for you know, a new head or whatever it was. So he came up with the idea of essentially going across to China, getting some razors made that were at the same quality as the competitors, but developed in a cheaper way. And he applied a subscription model to that, so that every month or 2 months or 3 months or whatever your preference is, you'd be sent all the replacements and things for a much cheaper price. Now, the difference was that because he was doing it through a subscription model, although the consumer felt like they were getting better value because they were seemingly getting more blades for a cheaper price, most people buying Gillette maybe would only buy the new heads for it once every 3 or 4 months when it was completely dull and unusable. Where with this model, people continuously, month after month, getting new razor blade heads, and actually in the long run spending more money on that item than they would through the previous model. And then obviously for the consumer, the product was cheaper. They started adding additional products like shaving creams and body washes. And as far as outreach goes, they tried to make it very fun and comical, and almost kind of poke fun at the existing business models. And subsequently that became a huge business model, to a point where Unilever bought it for, I can't remember what the amount was.
$1 billion.
$1 billion, and bought it off him, so he did fairly well from that. I'm just going to skip ahead a few because I think we're running short on time. But that gives you a great example of how the scopes and the consumer needs and all those things brought together can create, as we said, meaningful innovation, and can actually add huge value to you, to your consumers, and do that in a way where you're not just thinking of something cool and creative for the purposes of being cool and creative. You're doing it because it actually means something to you and your consumers. So the last bit we'll go through, and we'll go through fairly quickly because I'm aware that we're running short on time, is when you've come up with these ideas, how do you know where to place your bets and what ideas should be put forward? And the way we do this is we look at what we call an innovation portfolio. And this is basically the different types of innovation, the returns for those innovations, and where you should be putting your efforts. So we do this in 3 stages. It's what we call incremental, adjacent, and radical innovation. So incremental innovation is using existing technology and an existing consumer base to develop something new. So this could be, if you make toothpaste, changing the flavor of it, or if you're a chocolate bar, putting something new in it, a new filling. So it's kind of small innovations that help you make a bit more money, but essentially you're not really going beyond that consumer market. You've already got all the technologies and resources you already use. Adjacent would be bringing in one of the new things. So it could be taking that product and trying to sell it to a new market, or it could be bringing in something completely new to change that product or service. And this is what we call adjacent innovation. And then the final stage is what we call radical. And this is looking at something where it's a new technology, it's a new market, and it is completely different for your business model. So radical, something like the smart home assistants for Amazon could be considered a radical innovation, because it was a new technology that was intended to get brand new markets, brand new consumers that wanted tech products to use Amazon services to buy from them. So the sort of general rule is that when you're looking at innovation, you should spend 70% of your time on incremental innovation, 20% on the adjacent, and 10% on radical. But when we look at the returns from this, it's basically the complete opposite way around. So basically from people that run constant innovation sessions and develop new products, they found that 10% of their returns come from the incremental innovation, 20 from adjacent, and 70% of their returns come from that radical innovation that they developed. So this is kind of like the general rule that we try to teach people when we go through innovation. It's the thing that we go through our clients and put in place rules for their innovation portfolio. But obviously this is something that you need to look at and find out what is correct for your business and how it would work best for you. Just to sum that up, so you can sort of break down what we've just said. So in order to innovate and take the challenge out of innovation, we're looking at the 3 Ds, which is how you think about innovation. It's the mindset of you and your organization. So be disruptive, think differently, embrace digital. Innovation essentials are the things that you need in place in your organization to actually facilitate the need to innovate. So that would be the process, the strategy, and the culture. Developing a healthy innovation culture is looking at how you remove barriers and restrictions that stop people wanting to innovate, removing the fear of failure, and encouraging people to think differently. Taking stimulus and insight, so you're not just looking at cool things you've seen, you're looking at how that actually adds meaningful innovation to you and how it adds meaningful value to your customers. Using scopes to identify areas to innovate within your company. The sprint process to give some format to that, some structure. Looking at an ecosystem of innovation, so not just, you know, a singular innovation. You're looking at how you can innovate your entire company as an ecosystem. And finally, where to place your bets. So if you follow this, I mean, we've kind of condensed it into a very short space of time, which is why we're trying to rush it. We're rushing now to try and get it all in. But this is essentially the overview of what innovation looks like for any business, big or small. And these are the key steps. So I think what we'll do now is we'll just, for a couple of minutes, if anyone's got any questions, send it through the Q&A or through the chat, and we'll do our best to try and answer any questions you've got. And then we'll round up with some information about the course that we're on, the program that we're on now, and how we can help you with some of these steps.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, so if you've got any questions, feel free to submit them. Of course, there's going to be some details at the end, so you're welcome to submit questions via email afterwards if you've got any burning things afterwards. But if you could just, we are running slightly behind, but if you could just indulge me for a couple of minutes, there's a little bit of further information here about how you can be supported directly with for your business. And what the Growth Hub is doing to help businesses adopt digital and bring in digital thinking into their business, and also how to innovate and ensure growth and continue. So one of the first things, of course, are these webinars like what you're attending today, where there's people giving insights and information, and they're coming up. There's a couple more coming up. One next Monday, Technical and Digital Company Essentials, and on the 3rd of August, Driving Traffic, so effective paid advertising, all really good stuff. Sorry, this keeps moving about. And then there's the Digital Catalyst program. So one-to-one expert support for your business. Now, this is a really interesting program, and I really invite you to get involved in it. It's completely free. It costs you nothing. It's all funded, and it's a way to implement all of this stuff and get direct support from consultants like ourselves. And there's a whole wide range of them that are working on the program that will come and work with you directly. And essentially what it does is it has a consultant come and work with your business to look at where you're at in terms of digital adoption now, what your business is about, the way it's set up, and then how it can be developed and enhanced, particularly using digital, but not just that. But in terms of innovation to grow and do more. And it might be working more efficiently, it might be developing new products and services, increasing work, building your profit margin, whatever it might be. There's lots of different sides to it. And also signposting you to grants and funding and support that's out there to help businesses continue to grow. Sorry, I'm just blasting through this because I'm just aware of time. But like some of the ideas in terms of digital, you know, it might be moving things to the cloud, bringing in a new technology infrastructure, introducing an e-commerce option to your business, protecting your business through cybersecurity, online accounting, etc., etc. These are far from exhaustive. There's lots of things we look at, but just to give you a taste from a digital point of view, some of the things that might be approached. And of course, the consultant will work with you, help you to identify what technology are out there and what would be suitable for you, what would offer value for money, what would offer big returns for you, how this will help your business to grow, how you will find new customers or new offers, or continue to future-proof and move forward. And the way the program works is essentially a consultant would be assigned to you. It starts with a digital benchmark where we essentially run a process to work out where you're at now, what you're currently using, how you approach digital technology, how you use it in the business. This is followed, the results of that then sets up a workshop where the consultant comes to work for you and your team, and we look for opportunities or address barriers that have come up off the back of the digital benchmarking. And then we work with you to use these, enhance these, and work how to innovate, come up with new products, new services, new things, new ways of working, you know, completely open it up. And there's a lot to be said for having external people come into your business and look at it with a fresh eye. It really makes a huge, huge difference. Off the back of that, we create an action plan. So this is what we've discovered. This is how you can now action it and implement this. And then we'll guide you to the support and advice and guidance and finance and whatever it is out there to help you implement that stuff. And of course, link you to technology providers as well that can help support you with whatever tech that might be. You know, and the usual stuff, the stuff we've already talked about, but it's basically to help you grow more profits, be more agile, you know, be able to be resilient in times of crisis. You can move your business to make sure that you can adapt to what's going on, and keep your business safe, you know, with things like cybersecurity, etc., and maintain good staff and all the rest of it. So there's loads and loads of benefits to it. Digital Catalyst, here's the contact details. We would really invite you to get involved. There's a telephone number there you can ring, or you can email digitalcatalyst@winningmoves.com. Or if you go to the Grow My SME site, growmysme.co.uk, and go to the Digital Catalyst section, you can register your business there. Pretty much anyone's applicable, qualifies rather, if you're an SME. Essentially, if you qualified as an SME, then you're likely to qualify. And once you've registered, a consultant will be in touch with you and we can start the process. As I say, it's completely free and you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain, especially in these times. So you might as well get involved in it and take part. And just finally, before you go, if I could, I can't do it. Jamie, can you bring the poll up? If we could just ask you to quickly just tick the answers in this poll for us, just so we know that the information we're sending out to you, it'll help us improve future webinars and give us a little bit of extra insight from what you're watching. We'd really appreciate if you can just answer a couple of these poll questions, just so we can take the data away from that. And anything further you want to ask us, you've got a chance to ask a question if you'd like to. And that from us is just really to say thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you coming on. We hope it's been insightful. And this information we've given you has been very much an overview snapshot. But as I say, this can be applied to your business and you can have people come and work with you directly free of charge to help you implement some of this stuff. So please take up the opportunity and get involved. And we welcome you to get involved and we look forward to seeing you again soon. And thank you for your attendance today.